Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Arantza Zugalan and I'm a member of the Build Up editorial team.
Welcome to Build Up, the European Commission's portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. Directly stemming from the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, Build Up is the meeting place for everyone involved in making the European building and construction sector more energy efficient. Every month we focus on a topic that is key to making Europe's buildings as energy efficient as possible. Exploring that, you can find the latest content such as expert talks, webinars, case studies and more. From architects and engineers to academics and policy makers, we've got you covered. Build Up brings together thousands of registered members to reap the benefit of Europe's collective intelligence on all aspects of energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. The Build Up portal benefits from the expertise of our ambassadors. Drawn from industry and academia, the ambassadors bridge the gap between EU and national level and help shape our editorial content. Want to promote your work? Build Up disseminates your research, projects and events through a variety of channels. Become a member to exchange knowledge with your peers. You can disseminate tools and resources, share good practices and consult open source publications. Join the discussion on social media and become part of the Build Up community, or subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest news. However you participate, the Build Up portal is here to inspire, inform and connect. Build Up, the European portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. Join the community for opportunities and updates.
Good morning to all the audience. It is a pleasure for Build Up to host today's webinar entitled Transposing and Implementing the EPBD Recast, New Generation Energy Performance Certificates, brought to you by EPB Centre and Build Up. The webinar will explore the role of EPCs in supporting a data-driven, future-ready implementation of the EPBD. There is a slight change in the agenda today that will be as follows. We will begin with a welcome and introduction from Andrei Vladimir Litiu, Executive Director at EPB Centre. Following Andrei, we will jump to the presentation of Ulrike Nuscheler, Senior Project Advisor, Live Energy plus Live Energy at CINEA on live clean energy transition and buildings and how policy can be turned into action. We will follow with the presentation of Aitor Dominguez, Area Manager in Building Efficiency at IDEA Spain, that will present the Council perspective, followed by the perspective of the Commission presented by Pau García-Audi, Policy Officer with DG Ener. We will round off the webinar with a panel discussion with the speakers moderated by Rémi Colombet, Senior EU Affairs Officer at EURACE. We invite and encourage the audience to send us questions through the GoToWebinar platform that can be answered during the panel discussion. Please specify if your question is for a specific speaker or if it's for all speakers to answer. You will be able to find the webinar recording on the Build Up portal and our YouTube channel in the coming days, together with the presentation slides. And now, without further hesitation, we will move directly to our first speaker of today, Andrei Vladimir Litiu, Executive Director at EPB Centre. Andrei, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arantza. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be the one opening today's webinar. Arantza already mentioned the details you see here on slide. On the next slide, you'll see that I'm having the role as the Executive Director at EPB Centre, and I'm using the visual identity of one of the next-gen EPC cluster projects that has recently closed after 3 years of implementation, and that's the user project. Please connect on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter to explore further synergies on all the activities that are happening. On the next slide, You'll see a brief overview about the EPBD revision process. It's still ongoing. You can see when it has entered in the final stages, because there was an open public consultation a while ago already. And we are now basically in the trilogue step, which has already started, as I guess most of you know, before the summer break, and is now in full negotiation mode. On the next slide, you'll see the latest publicly available document. So this is something that can be found on the website of the Council. And you can see the positions of the three institutions, the Commission, the Council, and the Parliament on different articles. Of course, not the entire content is made public, but you can have an idea of where the negotiations are taking place, at which areas of the EPBD. You have the links behind these images, so as soon as you will get the recording and the slide deck, you'll be able to click your way through, in case you don't already have this document at hand. It was published earlier this month. And on the next slide, this is an extract from a previous presentation from one of our speakers today, Pau at DGNR. And the reason why I reused this, with his permission, of course, thank you, Pau, again, is to showcase that the energy performance certificates have a sort of linchpin role when we consider the full overview of EPBD related policy instruments. And hence why this webinar today has a focus on EPCs, but of course it covers the wider scope of EPBD as a whole. And this is the transition in between the policy happenings, from which we are going to get some updates, of course, to the extent possible to be shared by Aitor and Pau. We are very glad and thankful to have both of them with us today. But before that, we will hear more about how the colleagues at CINEA are turning policy into action. Before we do that, I'll just show you on the next slide some of the clusters that are already in existence. These are projects that have been funded by Horizon 2020, and then the subsequent Horizon Europe, which is still in full swing. And you can see the dates in which these projects have started. This is a cluster that I'm very grateful that I could facilitate from REHVA as an organization and EPB Centre. And it's a very, I would say, strong community that has already many results available for what is going to happen after the EPBD recast is adopted in the near future, meaning the transposition and implementation of the, let's say, fresh EPBD. On the next slide, you'll see that we also took steps as a cluster to have a sort of single visual identity, because we understand that for the stakeholder community at large, it's quite cumbersome to go on individual project websites. So we want to have a single entry point to all these results that are readily available. Additionally to the next-gen EPC cluster, more recently, on the next slide, you'll see there is an emerging cluster that has a very specific scope on smart readiness indicator. This is one of the policy instruments that I was referring to from EPBD. Of course, it's still highly linked to EPCs as the, I would say, more wider in scope policy instrument. And there are new projects that are starting this year, and of course many other related projects. But for that, I will leave the floor to Ulrike to share with you more details. The main message is that these clusters are collaborating, and we are having we are benefiting from the support of our dear colleagues at CINEA, and of course interacting with the colleagues at the Commission whenever possible via such events or other activities. So that would be from my side. Thank you everybody for having joined, and I welcome to get connected if we aren't already. And yeah, let's turn policy into action. I let Ulrike share how we can actually do that. Ulrike, the floor is yours.
Thank you so nice. Thank you so much for this super nice introduction and already highlighting and foreshadowing what we're going to do. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Ulrike Nuschler. I work as a senior project advisor in the European Executive Agency for Climate, Infrastructure and Environment, and more specifically in the Life, Energy and Climate Unit. So as you see, turning policy into action, that's the title of the presentation. And let's look a bit how we try to do this and how our projects try to do this. Voila, that was too much. So this is just an introductory slide for those of you that don't know our program yet. I mean, it's not that new, but also not so old. The LifeSet builds on the energy efficiency part of the Horizon 2020 that certainly you know, and we've taken on and further developed the policy implementation and the market uptake dimension, while Horizon rather had also a technological part. And this means that LifeSet inter alia tries to create favorable regulatory and market conditions, tries to mobilize private and public investments, build capacity, empower consumers, and does many more things. But just that you have a general frame of what we're doing. For this programming period, meaning 21 to 27, we have a budget under LifeSet of 1 billion euros, more or less. And what we do is we define the priorities and annual calls for proposals, also to be able to always respond to the policy challenges. So the next slide, as I said, sorry. As I said, we build on the activities that took place under Horizon 2020, and this slide gives you a quick overview of how the building topics and the thematic areas around buildings evolved over the years. And you see here the different strands and the thematic areas around the core pillars, which are deep renovation on the left side, then policy instruments, and this means notably EPCs. I've highlighted the next generation CSAs and IAs still on the horizon. Then we have also a cluster around smartness and smart services, and a new one more on focusing on buildings data. You can see here the involvement. You see how these topics and areas were addressed over the calls. I mean, on the live, you always these nice acronyms like Build, Perform, Veterano that usually help quite nicely to identify the areas. But you see also quite a lot of continuity there, and this is going to stay, I would say. Well, on the live, of course, we focus more on policy design, policy implementation, market uptake, and not so much on technologies, which doesn't mean that we wouldn't also be able to look at technologies, of course, because they're core for buildings. So now on the next slide, to become more concretely, how does our program respond to the challenges that are out there and still hinder the, well, I would say per se rational and also cost-efficient decision for building renovations and building upgrades? Just to name a few that I've picked here on the slides. For example, the complexity and the lack of projectability of renovations, in particular deep renovations. The costs that go along with renovation, but also already with assessments and audits and certificates. The perception of insufficient reliability and consistency of disclosure instruments, notably EPCs, but also SRI. The insufficient uptake of EPCs and SRI still as a market instrument to value buildings, and also split incentives. I mean, all these are big challenges there, and there are many more. And I want to show you how our projects somehow address those. For example, if you look at the pink bubble, our project would, for example, promote the rollout of prefabricated elements to make renovation more standardized, faster, less burdensome, and better coordinated. Our project would promote the use of automatically and easily understandable also building renovation passports, and that is again very relevant for EPCs. Our projects, to look at the blue bubble, work with public authorities in different member states on the design, but also on the consistency of EPCs inside the countries, but also across countries. very pertinent, also in view of the EPBD recast. They would also test the accuracy of EPC assessments and also explore new, more holistic features. That's a classical thing inside those EPC projects of the past and the future and the present. But they also integrate assessment tools and the procedures across instruments, notably EPCs and SRIs, and we have a whole series of projects doing those. But the projects also support member states in the testing and rollout of the Smart Readiness Indicator. They also train SRI assessors, and finally, well, not finally, it's just a selection. They develop service models, and that would be under the Smart Services bubble. That improves the use and the business case of energy efficiency by monetizing wider benefits, and thus also help overcoming split incentives. So I can't unfortunately present you all the super good projects that we have and will have. This is just a selection of those projects that are going to start now in October and November. And again, I cannot present them all, but just to give a rough description, these projects exactly address those challenges that we have just identified. And they've been selected under different topics, I have to say, live set topics. If I pick out EPD WISE, this has been selected under, so which you see at the top, under the topic policy. It is quite a horizontal policy implementation project, very strongly linked to the concerted action of the EPBD, but also involving EURACE and the Renovate Europe campaign, respectively. And focusing on countries with implementation deficits. But we have also then projects selected under the topic Build Perform, which is more classically and focused on EPCs. That's projects to support the implementation and the market uptake of EPCs and the consistency inside the EPCs, but also the consistency and the integration with, for example, the SRI. Note that we have also the project Smart EPC that will create a platform for the tools that have been and are being developed in the past and ongoing actions, a very important one, in order to make sure that all these results and good tools don't get lost. And finally, we also have projects in the area of deep renovation, more traditional on prefabrication elements, but also one-click reno that is about building renovation passports. So this is just a glimpse into our ongoing call. Maybe it's not too late for you to consider it. It's open until 16th November, and I've picked out the topics that are most relevant for you. There's this topic, Better Reno, that ultimately wants to make renovation more attractive, easier, faster, and more data-driven. Has 3 scopes. You see it on the slide: large-scale deep renovation where projects should develop new business models, coordinate supply and demand within the supply chain, deploy prefabrication elements. Then we have scope B with that aims to streamline the regulatory administrative framework for innovation, but mainly on the regional and local level. And then you have the scope C that is more about support for better quality and more accuracy of buildings data, notably to enable new services and to have better EPCs. Then on the right side, you have the other topic that should be relevant for you. Again, the topic policy, under which we try to help implement EU legislation. Scope B is about the EPBD, and there you see 2 focal areas, one more on the improvement of the effectiveness and coherence of the instruments, notably again EPCs. You see it's always there, but also then have a focal area to enhance the climate neutrality for the building stock. And just to remind you, we have a funding rate of 95%, and usually not for all topics, but for example for those, you would need 3 partners from 3 countries. So my last slide, that's the relaunch of the EU BSO. I remember that 1 year ago in July, I spoke and I invited people to apply for this tender, call for tenders. Now it's there, and the BSO, European Building Stock Observatory, is on the one hand brand new, but on the other hand not at all, because it has been there in the past. But this time, and it's on a new service contract, as I just said, and it should respond to really new policy expectations, also linked to the EPBD Recast. The aim is to make it the repository for EU building stock data, and it really has all the key actors and key experts inside. Voila, and there's even an obligation in the EPBD Recast as proposed, but we're confident that it might also become realities, that member states will be asked to report directly to the Building Stock Observatory. And just a last word, and I hope I didn't draw too much of my time, over my time. So just to emphasize that for our work on buildings, and notably on the instruments, the work of this EPC clusters has resulted to be so valuable, and it would also be in the future of so immense added value. And in particular, as we have a new set of relevant projects that you have just seen that are entering the stage. So I'm looking forward to this work to continue, and I think we should sit together and see how we can even more facilitate and support this work, and also to connect the projects with the policymakers even more than in the past. Many thanks. And I hand over now to our Spanish representative, Aitor Dominguez, and I disappear from the screen. Thank you.
Aitor, please unmute yourself.
No, we still can't hear you actually, Aitor. Sorry. Can you unmute again? No.
Now? Now, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes,
Yeah?
now, yes.
It's okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. As I told you, good morning to everyone. I'm Aitor Dominguez from IDAE, the Spanish Energy Agency. Thank you very much for the organization of the event, for inviting me to the workshop. I hope the workshop is of interest for you. And without further, I'd like to begin with by indicating that my objective is to show you the evolution that energy efficiency certificates and energy efficiency methodologies had in terms of methodology over the years and over the EPBD directives from my perspective, and what I think is the future of these energy performance certificates and methodologies in the part of calculation related with member states from the point of view of member states, and what is the most important issues maybe we are trying to tackle. In this image, you can see how the evolution of the EPBD building directive from 2002 to the present fits. You can see in the above part 2002, 2010, 2018, we don't know, 2000, next EPBD directive. And what I consider to be the most important milestones related to the energy certification of buildings that are especially related with the methodology in the part, in the other part, EPCs, NSIP, and ISO-I methodologies that have been changed along the years in several of these directives. We must consider that the needs that existed in 2002 from the part of member states and the ones that we have now are not exactly the same, nor the knowledge of the professional sector, the training, the technicians, this path that we started in 2002 has more than 20 years, and now we have not finished the walking yet this evolution. So we must continue in the coming years trying to solve several of the problems that we have came along find out in these years. I'm going to analyze some of those characteristics and how we are tried to solve and to evolve along the years with the different directives and methodologies and changes. The first one, maybe the first directive, 2002, with the publication of this directive, one of the main milestones that we have to establish member state point of view was establishing a certification mechanism, an EPC mechanism by itself that it doesn't exist until that time, which included a methodology which was already in the directive itself, in the annex, and with the services that we should evaluate a member state point of view, so that we try to do it a homogeneous calculation between among European level. This first directive was oriented to the citizen, but also to the administration, try to give them solutions to applying specific political issues, as well as giving information to the citizen above the information about energy related in buildings. The main characteristics of this directive was that the system is included in the calculation was not all the consumption related with the building, just part of them. Appliances were excluded in that moment, as well as indicators based on primary energy and emissions, the simplified methodologies and energy simulations. In that moment, there weren't energy simulators for specified for buildings, so we had to try and to use extremely complex energy simulation based on industrial solutions for the buildings, and all of that we have generate problems to member states trying to put all things over the table, trying to create a homogeneous system between member states. Some of them were the EPC image that was not defined, so maybe we decide an image for an image for each member state. Also methodologies adapted to the member state. We have to adapt that methodologies to our building stock, climate zones, construction typologies, and also that in that moment we didn't have digital registration of EPCs. So in that moment we didn't have big data as we can have now in order to create better policies. Therefore, this common methodology was adapted to each member state, and in a second stage in 2010, we did already include some modifications trying to solve that problems. One of the main milestones is that we attend was trying to establish a definition of NCEP and the optimal cost analysis, linking with concepts of energy and economic aspects, so for all member states in a common way. That early changes made us to create new indicators, to change the EPC content, to include recommendations to improve energy efficiency in the moment in which we have to push for the energy renovation of the building, as well as information adapted to EPC and for assessors and users. The EPCs were giving us information to administration and to the users, but was not enough. Not enough for the users and not enough for the assessors. So we tried to improve the mechanisms in order to give more information and more useful information for administration and users. Also, the creation of new simulation tools, specific and adapted for the requirements with the correct indicators, and technical updates in order to include all that necessities, as revision of the scales, the solution of the fault systems for existing buildings, and trying to find out how to include that buildings and to evaluate that buildings that were exist and we didn't have enough data to make the EPC, new materials, etc. However, this concerns certain heterogeneities between member states, which also detected with this directive. We try to carry out calculation and solutions to solve this in a common methodology. And with this process, we began to promote and to adapt methodologies to the ISO standards. European Commission worked hard to create a framework with the ISO standards applicable and adaptable by all member states in the way that they increase the homogeneity and trying to ensure that these values could be comparable between member states. And with that vision, several changes were made for the next directive. This is our current directive that we have nowadays. And in this directive, we link these standards as voluntary, not mandatory, but from the point of view that every member state should try to change and to adapt their methodology, trying to be more homogeneous between member states. As well as these changes, we try to change to include new indications, not only emission and consumption, but also differentiating between primary and final energy, including renewable and non-renewable standards, changing climate data and how to solve and how to make more homogeneous the primary energy factor between member states, as well as trying to solve the lack of accuracy with focusing efforts in assessors and their skills. But main important
I thought, sorry, I thought we have lost you. I don't know if it's a problem with your microphone. We cannot hear you. No.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
That's now, yes. Okay,
okay,
perfect. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Sorry.
So we have over the table three main documents related with the new directive, three proposals, the Commission proposal, general agreements from the Council proposal, and the Parliament proposal. And in these days, we're trying to negotiate and to take an agreement in a new directive. And in all of these three documents, there are some issues that are common. The establishing a new zero emission buildings concept, establishing the MEPS solution for renovating buildings, the infrastructure for sustainable mobility, and trying to push the sustainable mobility, trying to solve financing barriers and giving that push for the energy renovation of buildings, to include a specific solutions for renewable in the buildings, trying to take into account the whole life cycle carbon of the buildings and the materials, and the energy performance certificates, new provision for the energy performance certificates. That is an evolution of the last directive, and try to solve several of the problems that we have found in these recent years, and trying to cover several necessities that we have detected in the last years. In any case, we have common points in these three documents, as, for example, establish mechanisms to promote rehabilitation and inclusion of new criteria in the certificate, and new emissions indicators in the existing building with the SEP indicator, homogenization of the existing report of EPCs, trying to make it more useful for citizens, and including an annex with the content of this EPC, the new EPC, and the possibility of rescaling, not only for the calculations, trying to make it homogeneous between member states, but also trying to make any ratings to fit into rational scales between member states in order to solve the problem of homogeneous between member states in these calculations. One of these, or several of these necessities that we have detected were trying to better analysis of the building stock with more precision, more specific and individualized regulations, trying to make better and more rehabilitation for buildings, and try to integrate everything with renovation passports, financial programs, and using the one-stop shops as one of the key issues to solve, and to solve several of the barriers. The needs that we have detected to solve with this new directive are, from my point of view, from my perspective, differentiate between three steps. One of them is for the user needs, trying to make EPCs more comprehensive for them, giving more credibility to the user, and trying to contain the cost, including all that things that we are trying to include. The other part is for the initial needs. We need to ability to integrate different solutions that we have nowadays in the buildings in the new EPCs, trying to maximize the output information for the EPC assessors to give proper information for the owners, and try to facilitate the obligations and improving the energy measures that EPC assessors give to the owners. And finally, for the administration needs, including improvement of precisions and confidence, giving the possibility of exploitation to make more proper policies, and trying to give stability to the system in order to give the same stability to the policy provisions and needs law provisions in each member state. In the end, we try to solve the problems that market identifies, and try to include an energy living more comfortable, and for the public administration, trying to promote the decarbonization in a similar way between member states. How I see the future of the EPCs after the new directive. Maybe the new EPC should include information adapted to users, professionals, and the administration. And if it has to include more information in the EPC results, we should try to tackle and to solve this in the new directive. Try to improve the accuracy of the energy performance assessment results because we know that they are going to be used to renovate buildings. They are not only just for giving information about the energy performance of the building to the user, but also to give them the information about how they should renovate the buildings, and try to convince them that if they renovate buildings and put money in the buildings to improve the energy performance, it should be good for them. And we know that we have to tackle technical changes. One of them is maybe rescaling. trying to converse with the calculation across member states, try to integrate new solutions that are taken into account not in the new directive, but also in the current one that we have nowadays, trying to include a solution as for the electromobility market, trying to include renewables and storage in the new methodologies, and the smart and novel technologies that are taken into account with this SI indicator. Also, in this new directive, we should tackle the evaluation of the global warming potential of the materials and operational and in the materials, and in the integration of the renovation passports as a tool, as a very important tool to give information, accurate information for people to improve the renovation rate. And finally, that smart readiness indicator that may be one of the solutions for the integration of the energy grids with the buildings, with the flexibility for the grid and for the owners. As a conclusion, in the new EPCs in the future, we need to improve the confidence in the EPCs. We need to integrate in other existing building related systems. We need to identify the worst performing buildings from each member state, trying to tackle the best solution for renewable of these buildings. We should promote the rehabilitation from the point of view of financial solutions and the technical solutions. And we need to allow better knowledge of the building stock, trying to implement more effective policies. So giving that tool to the administration of each member state to include a better solution for the member states to tackle the important issue of decarbonizing the building stock in 2050. And that's all for my part. Maybe I think.
Thank you very much, Aitor. We have a little change while you were talking. Thank you very much to all the speakers until now. Dear audience, one of our speakers, Pau García-Audi, needs some time to join us, so we are gonna jump directly to the round table moderated by Remy Colombet, the Senior EU Affairs Office of EURACE. EURACE is the European Alliance of Companies for Energy Efficiency in Buildings. We are looking forward to your questions a little bit early than expected, and we hope to have Pau with us in a few minutes. So Remy, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So as you said, my name is Remy Colombet. Thank you very much for the invitation. I work for EURACE, and we're the European Association for companies producing products and services for energy efficiency in buildings. So we're covering the whole range of solutions from installation, windows, heat pumps, ventilation, softwares, control systems, having a broad view on what can be improved in buildings to make them more efficient. Now, just to open and broaden a bit the discussion on EPCs, we've seen that lately they've been more and more perceived as the main source of information regarding the performance of buildings by citizens and businesses, see how the place they work and live in performs. And this has been even more accentuated by the energy prices crisis and the Ukraine crisis, where we see that now people are looking a bit more at EPCs when it comes to buying property and renting property, because this has an impact on their energy bill, but also property value. We see that there is more demand for better performing building, and there's some price decreases for the worst performing ones. But this is a good sign that this tool is effective and is providing the information that it's supposed to provide. But as we've heard from our speakers just before, there are some challenges that are still in need of being addressed. The first one being that the rollout of EPCs is still a bit patchy in Europe. There are some countries that have been doing fairly well in rolling out EPCs over the building stock, thinking of the Netherlands, of Ireland, but in some other places, it's still very much a work in progress. So information regarding the state of the building stock is not fully clear in some countries in Europe. The second point is obviously on reliability. We've seen that consumer associations have been testing certifiers and obtaining very different results in some countries recently. So this is another issue to address. And finally, as Aitor mentioned, making sure that the information that is on the EPC is clear for the consumers, the citizen businesses. So we're in a very timely stage of the negotiations, as EPCs are being negotiated at the moment by the co-negotiators, the Commission, the Parliament, and Member States. And this is a good moment to see where the positions that have been released at the moment come from, what's the thinking behind each institution, and how the Commission is supporting the work, obviously in the negotiations, but also more long-term through support programs. So my first question to Aitor actually would be on the content of EPCs. What do you see as something that should be in there? We've heard different propositions regarding primary energy, final energy, but also new elements, the SRI, whole life carbon. Is that something that should be compulsory in there, or what's the range of flexibility, and what do these new pieces of information matter to businesses and consumers?
Yeah, really think the three main issues that you mentioned, maybe they are very important for the new EPBD directive. I think the three of them are taken into account in several points in the three documents of the on the new EPBD directive that are being discussed to make an agreement. And maybe it's important to know that the rollout of the EPCs, it's something that should be taken into account, not only because we have changed that maybe they are important for information for users when you are going to sell or to hire a building, but also in the renovation part of the building. We are trying to push the renovation of the building stock in Europe. Even more if they are in a worse performance situation, and we need to have as much as buildings with the EPC rollout spread, but we know what are the difficulties, and we know that maybe member states should have taken into account the best solution for the building stock, trying to tackle and to point out what are the main ways to do it, the best ways to do it, and the main buildings that should take first to take that information. And not only because of having the EPC, that solution is going to be solved of renovating that buildings, but also giving the reliable EPCs to the people, to the owner, in order to make that renovation a success. So that two items are included in the EPC in several points, and we are trying to accommodate the better solutions according with the necessities of each member states. Obviously, information not only should be included in the EPC, in the EPC, but also should be clear for the owner. And because of that, we don't know exactly what is going to be the final content of the EPC, because we are just trying to know what are the limits and what are the information available of each building. We know that we are managing building information that is not as easy to get as in an industrial sector, and knowing what is the difficulties, we are trying to include as much information as possible, and always thinking that that information should be useful for the owner and useful for the EPC assessor to include the better recommendations for each EPC. So we don't know exactly what is going to be the final solution and the whole package of information that is going to be included, but all of them are taken into account in the negotiations, and in order to include as much as possible, knowing that what is the limits of information, of the available information, and the homogeneous information between member states and between buildings.
Thanks a lot. Maybe a question to Ulrike to continue on the content. The European Commission has been supporting a lot of very interesting projects, as you mentioned. How do you talk between CNR and DGNR to have a sort of return of experience from these projects in the conception of new legislation? Is there a dialogue ongoing between the different part of the Commission on this point?
Yes, I would say absolutely. And I think we're also specifically in our unit in the privileged situation to have very, very close collaboration with ENER. And the working method is very simple. So we would feed in the project results into their considerations, and they would also ask us for evidence, for example, for impact assessments and so on. And also our topics or the call for proposals, they are always co-drafted. So usually we see what we have in the basket, but then we would get the input from DGN telling us what are the priorities, the policy priorities. And I have to say, I mean, already Horizon 2020 was very, very close to the Commission, and Horizon is very close to the Commission. But now LiveSat, that this demonstration and research focus has moved away a bit. We are even closer to policy implementation and market uptake. So I mean, it's our daily work with ENER to define the priorities and to see how our projects can even be closer and more tailored to their needs, and not only to their needs, of course, but to the needs of member states, to the needs of local and regional authorities, and to the people outside. And certainly with regard to EPCs. And of course, there's a nice strand of projects, mainly on the horizon, that are more about how to best use new technologies and how to integrate more features. But I think we also need these bread and butter projects that really look at normal buildings data that just guarantee or ensure that the reliability is there. And the more what was the word, linchpin? The more other instruments like maps, if they come and in whatever form they might come, are linked to EPCs. Of course, the reliability and accuracy of EPCs become absolutely fundamental. Otherwise, we have a problem of acceptability. Does this answer your question?
Yes, it's great, and this actually ties into controversial question that we get from the audience, saying why are we spending a lot of time on EPCs? Can we not just move on to actually mandating deep innovation because of the climate emergency? So do we need, what's the place for EPCs currently, given the stage of the rollouts? We are hearing sometimes discussions on proxies instead of EPCs. Where do you see the role for this tool in determining the action more concretely driving renovations? This both for you and
I mean, there's always the discussion of whether, I mean, also if you look at products that have a binding minimum energy performance requirements called eco-design and the labeling, so you have the push and pull effect. And of course, eco-design works super well, and maps might work also super well, but you need those two instruments together. And the EPCs have a much bigger role because they also somehow classify the first reference also for buildings data. So it's much more than just a label. it has much more significance. So in that sense, yeah, if we were completely rigid, we might still just go for maps. But even the maps, as they're now proposed, they're linked to EPCs somehow. So I don't think you can separate these two things. And then, as I said, I mean, reliability and accuracy is a core thing, and the accuracy will certainly also be more relevant with any more digitalized data that we have available. So my pledge could only be that you still go for actual data and that you increase the reliability. But I'm happy to hear other opinions and other perspectives on that.
Okay, from my point of view, maybe the same. All that information is really important to know, to take into account. Not only one solution should be the best, and what maybe it's more important is that we need to make that EPCs reliable, and we need to give flexibility to the member states to tackle the solution, the best solution for each member state according with the necessities. Maybe it's not the same necessities for everyone, and to solve the problem should be a prioritization for member states. Not the way to do it. We should take into account all the tools that we have above us and trying to use them wisely in order to finally get what we need is to decarbonize the building stock. So maybe all of them are important, and the main issue is to give flexibility to member states to choose what are the best solution in each case.
This is interesting. And just to come back to one point that you made just before regarding EPCs being also tools to incentivize renovations, how do we make the link between EPCs and the other instruments that have been proposed in the EPBD, in the building renovation passports, but also one-stop shops that are crucial in terms of providing information on funding, on what to do for people sometimes a bit lost on the renovation process. So what link do you see between the various elements in the directive?
I think all of them needs to be complementary. They have their own purpose in the end, and according with the necessities, you need to use 1, 2, or 3 of them, or all of them. Maybe passport and EPC have some relation, a special relation, and maybe that relation should be taken into account from the point of view of the usefulness of the EPC and the cost. Maybe the cost and the use that you are going to give of that information is not the same if you want to just sell a building, or if you want to make a renovation in the building to improve the energy efficiency in the building and to invest in the building. And because of that, I think they are complementary as in that idea they are considered in the EPD and the EPBD in order to complete the whole pack of solutions that we should give to the citizens and to the member states to tackle the problem of renovation rates.
Thanks. I'm reading and trying to pass on questions also from the audience, and there are questions on the reliability of EPCs, how to improve reliability, what control mechanisms, and this ties in also to discussions regarding calculated versus measured efficiency in buildings. What space do you have on an EPC?
I think it depends. between, for example, calculation and rate energy, it depends on the member states sometimes. And in any case, we have to think that the EPC is an information for an user, but also for another user if you are going to sell the building, and from prospective use of the building when you are going to change the amount of people who live in the building, or to use the building, or the way in which you use the building. So because of that, we must differentiate between EPC and audit because of the cost and because of the use of both of them. But when we are talking the problem of rehabilitation and reliability for investment in buildings, maybe you need to know real use consumption of the building, and in that cases maybe the EPC could have a complement to increase that reliability and try to give more accurate information for the owner. As I told you before, maybe that is an issue that each member state should take into account according with their necessities. I think, but all of them are taken into account, and all of them maybe are tools that we should have in mind in order to improve the solutions that we give to the citizens.
Thanks a lot. And just been one that's Pau Janus. So I think he'll present on this topic. Pau Garcia from the European Commission, DG NR, has been one of the most knowledgeable persons on EPCs. So very glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Remy, and apologies for arriving so late. You want me to carry on with the presentation then?
Sure, and I think we can go back to questions if you have time afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, and apologies again for arriving so late. Unfortunately, we are in the middle of negotiations for the recast of the EPBD, and we were called for a meeting in council. That's why behind me I have the council logo and not the commission logo. They were kind enough to let me a room so I could do this as fast as possible. So anyway, moving onto the presentation. So EPCs, we have had them since 2002. They were part of the first EPBD. The main elements, you know them already, but I think it's important to go through them. First of all, it's a tool that it's there to provide information to prospective buyers or tenants. That was the main intended role at the time. It's compulsory when selling or renting a building. It must be shown to the prospective buyer or tenant, and also must be shown in advertising media. And in the case of public buildings or buildings frequently visited by the public, it needs to be in a visible place. A few more elements. It needs to be produced by a qualified independent expert. It's subject to an independent control system, so it's subject to quality assessment. And its rating, it's based on kilowatt hours per square meter per year of primary energy, but additional ratings must be used. Again, in the case of France and Ireland, for example, they also use CO2 as a rating. Additional elements, how we are using EPCs at the moment. We have approximately between 10 and 60% of the building stock, depending on the member state. It may not look like a lot in some cases, but the important element is this is a representative sample of the building stock. So we can already start using EPCs to model and to make policy decisions based on the information that we have. Of course, we have to be careful because there is an overabundance of, or let's say that new buildings and buildings in the real estate market are overrepresented in the EPC stock, in the EPC database, sorry. So we have to take this element into consideration. We also see that most member states make some level of the EPC information publicly available. Here in Brussels, for example, we can check the rating of any building, but just a rating, we cannot get any information about it. And then in practice, what we're also seeing, which is quite relevant, I think, it's we see evidence for increased value of properties with good ratings. That doesn't necessarily mean that energy performance is valued over other elements such as location. That's not the case, but we do see that there is a good correlation between the EPC value and the value of the property, and we think the main reason for that is that actually a good EPC rating demonstrates that the building is of good quality. It's built up to modern standards, it's been renovated recently, or it has elements that guarantee a good energy performance, that usually reflects good quality. We also see that in a couple of member states, we are starting to have initiatives that address worst performing buildings in relations to EPCs. So we see already something very similar to minimum energy performance standards proposed in some member states. In terms of the of where we are now, which is the recast of the EPBD, just going through a few of the very broad elements. We have the introduction of national building renovation plans. They substitute the long-term renovation strategies. The main element there is the update of the long-term renovation strategies to really reflect the decarbonization of the building stock up to 2050. We have the introduction of minimum energy performance standards. This is an obligation for member states to ensure that they renovate the worst performing buildings in the building stock. We also have the introduction of the zero emission buildings, which is the new building standard that we will start going to have from 2030 onwards. And then I think I quite liked what Aitor mentioned before. We have a package of solutions that we need to provide, and we call these the enabling framework. And it's really a number of provisions that are there to help citizens to make the best decisions, either for new buildings or for buying buildings, but also for financial institutions, for example, to see where they can invest. And there we have a large number of elements. We have the smart readiness indicator, we have the building renovation passport, we have a lot of links to finance, for example. And last but not least, we also have the EPC. And in there, sorry, I'm struggling to change the slide. There, the EPCs are one of the key elements in the revision of the EPBD. The main element there, or the key elements that we want to consider, is we want to improve their role as an information tool. We also want to improve the quality and coverage, and we want to make it as available and as accessible as possible. We're also very aware that the EPC links to other initiatives. I'll talk about it more later on, such as the EU Green Taxonomy. So we need to make sure that the EPC is ready to fulfill this role. Sorry, I'm trying to change the slide, but it's a bit slow in reacting. So in terms of the specific provisions to improve the energy performance certificates, the first one, I think, it's the increased quality, reliability, and accessibility of the EPC. Sorry, I should have said this at the very beginning. I'm talking mainly about the proposal as the Commission's proposal. I cannot talk about the Parliament or the Council's proposals. That's their proposal. It's their job to talk about them. I cannot take an opinion on what they say and what they've put in that proposal, but I think I can talk about some of the common elements. I will try to do this throughout the next couple of slides. So in terms of quality and reliability and accessibility, we have strengthened provisions on the quality assessment of EPCs. What we see is that these provisions have remained largely in common throughout the three texts. Then we have the provisions on a harmonization of energy classes from 2025. I'm not quite sure I like the term harmonization because I think it goes a little bit too far, but we definitely propose the introduction of common criteria for defining classes from A to G. There we have some differences between the member states on how they define these classes. Sorry, between the text in Council and the text in Parliament. But I think the key takeaway from this is there is the beginning of a common approach to take the EPC classes one step further. And the same needs to be set for the use of a common template with key criteria that need to be there, clear indicators, and also making these indicators as available as possible. The other element is the guarantee that EPCs need to be provided by an on-site visit. However, there we also introduce an element for the use of metered data for calculation. And the key element there, it also links to Annex 1, is that we need to make sure that even when we use metadata for producing an energy performance calculation for an EPC or for something else, we need to be able to extract the influence of the building users, because people use buildings in very different ways, and also the influence of the climate. Apart from that, we also introduce an obligation for all public buildings and all buildings offered for sale or rent to have EPCs requirements following the update of the following a major renovation. Sorry, there is a small delay in the change of slides, and it's sometimes a bit difficult. Other elements that we considered in the EPC are, for example, the simplified update procedure. This links very much, for example, to the building renovation passport. If we are only doing small updates to the building, we should be able to reflect this on the EPC without having to completely reissue an EPC and therefore reducing the cost. And last but not least, I think one of the key elements in this proposal is the obligation to have national databases for energy performance of buildings, which would include the EPC, but also a number of other elements, such as the building renovation passport, the smart readiness indicator, and for these publicly accessible databases to also report, to make public reports on their content, and also to make regular transfers to the Building Stock Observatory based on a common template. There, the key element is we want to make the information on these databases as accessible as possible. Already member states want to do quite a bit of these things, and I think they're doing a good job of it, but by introducing these provisions in the EPBD, we make it a lot easier and much more uniform across the EU. And last but not least, I mentioned something of this already. We are strengthening the links of the EPC between the EPC and the building renovation passport, the smart readiness indicator, but also with the life assessment of global warming potential, which is a key element in the recast of the EPBD. And last but not least, I've shared this slide already with a few of you, but I think it's important to underline that the EPC has a key role within the EPBD. We use it for a lot of things, and it links with a lot of elements. It links with the calculation methodology, with the minimum energy performance requirement, which in a lot of cases, for example, we use to demonstrate that a building complies with the requirement at the building permit stage, but also when the building is completed. It links and it provides information with electromobility, with a digital building logbook. It will have some element of relevance with minimum energy performance standards, but that will depend on the final design of minimum energy performance standards. It links with building renovation passports. Very, very relevant. It links with the EU Green Taxonomy, and there we've done a lot of effort to make sure that the EPC template can be used for the EU Green Taxonomy, but also to ensure that financial institutions can access databases of EPCs to make sure that they can report on their compliance with the EU Green Taxonomy and make this a lot easier. So basically, I just wanted to provide an image of how the EPC links with all the other elements and how in the design of the recast of the EPBD, we try to address each and every one of these elements. The final design of all of these provisions will of course depend on the outcome of the negotiations. That remains to be seen, but I think it's important to underline that pretty much every single one of these elements, in some way or another, it's represented in the three texts, in Council, Parliament, and Commission proposals. So it will be there in the final element, and we are going to have a lot of work in the coming years to really support the development of the EPC as this cornerstone tool that we use for many things across the EPBD. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentations, and I don't know if you have any questions or if there is something coming out of the discussion that you want me to comment on or address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pau. In fact, you have made the audience move quite a lot. There are many questions going on, and I will give the floor to continue our roundtable to Remy. Remy, the floor is yours. There are many questions going on.
Yeah, so just to state again, Pao, I'm not asking questions on the state of the negotiations, but the idea is more to understand where the negotiators come from in what they've proposed in the Commission, in the Council General approach, and voilà. So that's a bit the idea, and obviously sharing the questions from the audience. And there was one on how specific EPCs are and adapted to the national context, and if they take into account climatic zones in and maybe that's for Aitor too.
Yeah. About the EPC related to the climatic zones, the methodology in each directive it's included by itself, and in all of them are taken into account all specificities that each member state needs to have to create their own scale and their own EPC system. So I think it's something that is not going to change really. In the end, we need to try to make a convergence between member states, and building observatory try to give that convergence. But we know that each member state has their own issues, and all of them are included in all the methodologies that are have been taken into account from the 2002 directive, 2010, 2018, and even that possibility is included in the ISO standards that were promoted for the last EPBD, the current EPBD. So that is something that is being taken into account, and from our point of view, I think it's going to be something similar up to now, because we need to have flexibility to create the system by each member states, taking into consideration that we know that we should convergence and make more a more homogeneous system in the moment in which there are common obligation for all member states.
Thanks a lot. And I see there's also a question regarding the EPC coverage over the time and change in building structure ownership. How is that? You touched a bit upon that, Pao. When you need the EPC to be updated, basically.
Well, the EPC has a validity of 10 years according to the current EPBD in place. So every 10 years, you should get a new one if you need it. In principle, the EPC is only needed if and when you rent or sell a building, or when you have a new building. There are separate obligations for public buildings, which they have to have it in all cases. So that's one of the issues that we have with the EPC at the moment, which is that it really follows the real estate market and the development of new buildings. One of the things we try to do in the proposal for the recast of the EPBD is to look at which other areas it would make sense to introduce the EPC, which is why we propose, for example, to have it as a requirement if and when you do a major renovation in an existing building, but also if you're renovating a contract for a rent of a building, because then we think it makes sense for the building user, for the tenant, to see how their building compares to other buildings, and maybe take a decision based on that. So of course we encourage as much as possible the use of the EPC, and we think it makes a lot of sense, for example, to link it with financial aid. So if a member state provides a grant, in many cases they ask for an EPC before, after, or for a comparison between the EPCs. So we see that there are a lot more situations where the EPC could be used, but those are the bare minimums in the current legislation, and also what we proposed in the recast.
Thanks a lot. That was really clear. There's a lot also of questions regarding the partial harmonization proposed in the text, and so maybe if you could come back quickly on the rationale behind that, and maybe later on the challenges maybe that come with the partial harmonization for some member states.
Yeah, really, you mentioned it is it's difficult to make that harmonization because we have our methodologies are running from nearly more than 20 years, and now we have common issues between each member states, among the member states. We need to harmonize. From our point of view, the use of the ISO standards that we start to use broadly from 2018 is something important. But we know also that we need to have flexibility to tackle all our building stock. Each member state has differences between between building stocks. Also specifies with climatic zones, and all that issues are taken into account in our personal way of developing the methodology. That is an open methodology that is along the directives has been close to a common solution, but we still need to have that flexibility to tackle all the problems in between inside each member states, because in any other case, we should have a common European standard for ISO for EPCs, but could be not useful for the inside part of the building and could not represent the building stock of each member states.
I don't know if you want to complement the discussion, Paul.
No, I think I agree with what Aitor has said. We have to accept the fact that we have to deal with the fact that there are differences in the calculation methodology at the moment. There are differences in climate. There are differences in the way building stocks are set in member states due to historical and cultural reasons, but also the fact that member states may want to address or set up specific policies for their building stock. So we need, it's not possible to have a fully harmonized EPC, but we think we could do more in order to bring the different elements together, because at the moment we have very varied scales, very varied criteria to define these scales, and maybe on these we can have a better common understanding of what the EPC means.
There's also new questions about reliability of EPCs, and I think Gareth is pointing out the French example of making certifiers liable for the EPC grade that they give a building. Is that something that's been talked about regarding the new EPBD, and can that be something that could be expanded elsewhere in Europe?
Is this for me?
For both of you.
I mean, for us, we've seen multiple ways of addressing the penalties aspect of EPCs and how they are treated legally. There are multiple ways of addressing it. From our side, we think that this is best left to member states, meaning they can decide how they want to address the case of bad EPCs. The example in France is good. In Belgium, there is another example where they have fines, and the fines are proportional to how far off they are from the EPC. So if you say that your EPC is C and it's actually a D, you get a fine. But if you say that it's A and it's D, you get a much bigger fine. It's proportional in that sense. For this, we think that there are multiple ways. What we've really tried to do in this recast is to make sure that we have a common approach to measure the level of EPC, and the member state has to reach that level of quality, which we identify as 90% of EPCs should be correct, and then the member state can define exactly what they define by correct, because there are differences in EPCs. But we think that with these criteria, with these common criteria, and also making sure that this criteria is published and that the results of the analysis are also published, we can reinforce not just the quality but also the perception of quality of EPCs.
really better. It's not only just one solution. It's as the previous answer is part of the solution. Also improving the skills of the quality experts, assessors, or improving the mechanisms, the tools that we give to the assessors to improve to evaluate the buildings. Maybe that is just one of the tools that we have to do it, and we need to use all of them in order to improve quality and to give more reliability to the EPCs.
Thanks a lot. That was really clear. I'm being told that we need just one last question before closing. So this one will look a bit forward and imagining that we find you find a deal on the new EPBD. How do you see EPCs evolving in the coming years? Is it a set process or still a work in progress over the coming years in Europe?
Yeah, sure. I think it's,
we can't hear you, Aitor. We can't hear your microphone, Aitor. I don't know if.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's okay. Yeah, I was saying that maybe that is a non-ending way. You are always trying to improve the quality and improving solving the problems that you find in the way. And we know that is a new step that we are trying to solve with this new directive. But we know also that we will find new barriers and new things that we should solve in the next coming years, because our necessities are going to be different also. So we should be open to be always aware of we should have to change to solve all that problems.
If you want to complement Ben and Sepa.
No, I think, well, first of all, I say we are still very, very confident that we will get a good deal out of the EPBD. It's a tough negotiation, but there is a constructive atmosphere at the moment, so I'm confident. I'm confident also that the EPC will remain a key aspect of the EPBD. It links to too many articles and too many different provisions for it not to be the case. We have a lot of work to help member states on developing the databases and how much use can they make of it, how they can link the EPC with a smart radius indicator. We have a lot of projects that are looking into these areas and how we can make better use of digitalization, how we can make better use of meter data. So I think we are getting a lot of ideas on how we can improve the EPC over the coming years and make it more fit for purpose and better in the process. So I think we are going to get a lot out of this recast of the EPBD, especially on the EPC.
I'd like to thank now all the panelists. Thanks a lot for this detailed answers. You know, it's a tricky period with negotiations going on, but we got a lot out of you. So thanks a lot for all the information that you could provide today. And I'll pass back the microphone to Andre.
Hope you can hear me loud and clear. So it's my role to wrap up this webinar. As you expect, I would give my sincere thanks to Pau, to Aitor, to Ulrike. We didn't manage to get a person from the European Parliament just because the busyness of these negotiations and this period. So Pau, very specifically addressed to you, many thanks for making it work, despite the fact we rearranged a bit the flow of this session. I think it's a session that normally from the get-go people would have said you cannot do it now, it's impossible, but thanks to you guys we made it happen. And this gives me, I would say, a positive feeling, not only on how the EPBD will evolve now, and yeah, the new one being transposed and implemented, but I also have this feeling being part of the next gen EPC cluster, the SRI cluster, so these projects that are contributing a lot to the EPBD related policy instruments that already have results readily available, and some of them are still in implementation and some of them are starting soon, that it's almost like a ideal synchronicity situation. So I would like to end in this positive note that I think the conditions are optimal at this moment in time for the building stock evolution in Europe, and hopefully it will have a spillover effect all around the globe. So I would just say that let's continue going in this direction of going farther together as opposed to fast alone. I know I say this quite often, but I truly believe in this mantra, while of course respecting the principle of subsidiarity, which is very important to all member states. I give special thanks also to the Build Up portal for hosting us with yet another interesting webinar, and look forward to staying in contact with all of you for the upcoming steps. And I kindly suggest to all the audience to follow Build Up portal, to follow the individual projects, and of course the EU institutions to be up to date and join subsequent similar events. So a big thank you from my side with my EPB Centre and also REHVA hat on.
Thank you so much, Andrei, like always. And a big thank you to the speakers and also to the audience for attending today's webinar. A reminder that you will be able to find the recording of today's session on the Build Up portal and our YouTube channel in the coming days, together with the presentation slides. We have many webinars planned for the second half of 2023, including some very interesting interactive sessions as part of a series with the Bus Go Circular project. So keep an eye on the Build Up calendar and our social media for updates on this. We wish you all a pleasant week. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.